Okay, Rabbosai, we stopped yesterday on Daf Ayin Vav Amid Beis, and we are a few lines down from the top. Let's count down from the top. We're up to one second. We're up to line 2, actually. We just started Ayin Vav Amid Beis yesterday. Now, if you recall, we're trying to establish that Shasiya Bichlal Achil. Reish Lakish quoted the pasuk in Meiser Sheni. It says, "V'achaltu l'fnei Hashem Elokecha Maser degoncha siroshcha v'yitzrecha." The Torah used the word "v'achalta" as a reference to tirosh, and Reish Lakish understood that tirosh is yayin, and that proves that shtia is included in achil. And now the Gemara is going to raise an objection to Reish Lakish on line 2. The tirosh amrahu. Is it really so that the word tirosh refers to wine, and hence shtia b'chal achila? Vasadia, we have a brisa. Hano der min tirosh. If a person takes upon himself a neder that he won't have hana from tirosh, asur b'chol mine mesika umuter b'yayin. He's not allowed to eat sweet fruits like grapes, or maybe certain apples are very sweet, but he's allowed to drink wine. Now Rashi points out that the wine has to be beyond 40 days. So it's 40 days since they extracted the wine from the grapes. Otherwise, it's considered grapes. It has a halacha of a pri. But anyway, we see clearly from this price that tirosh is not yayin, but rather tirosh means mesika, sweet fruits. So how can Reish Lakish prove from this pasuk of tirosh that shsia b'chlal achila? On the contrary, we're talking about peros. Peros clearly is achila; it's not shisia. And the Gemara doesn't like this kasha at all. Sometimes the Gemara is very impressed with the question. In this case, the Gemara is unimpressed with the kasha. The lav chamrahu. Are you going to tell me that yayin is not the translation of tirosh? Baksiv, a pasuk in Zechariah Navi, the tirosh yinovev besulos. So the Navi now is describing the beauty of the land at the end of days, in the future days. And the Aretz will produce tirosh, and it'll be on a very high quality. Some say that the grapes today, the wines today, on a very high quality. That's an indicative that the prophecy of Zechariah is coming to fruition. Now, what's going to happen here is that if we drink this very high quality wine, then we're going to get drunk. It's highly intoxicating. And Zechariah is telling us that in novev besulos, the word besulos here is a metaphor for anything that's closed, and Yinovev means to open, and it's a reference to the secrets that a person keeps in his heart. But once he's under the influence of of an intoxicating beverage like the high quality wines of Israel, the Yosef Lavo, he is going to spill the beans. He's going to reveal those secrets. In any event, we see clearly that the word tirosh is a reference to wine. Because again, Zachariah is talking about something that will cause intoxication. He's not talking about fruits, he's talking about wine. So how can you even accuse Reish Lakish of misinterpreting the word tirosh? Is davar abba min tirosh yinove v'sulos. Right, the wine that you extract from the grapes is going to cause people to reveal secrets. Furthermore, I'll bring you another pasuk to prove to you that tirosh is indeed wine. Vaksiv, Shlomo Melech Mishlei, I'll read the whole pasuk. He says, "Kaveh es Hashem mehonecha, v'sirosh yikavecha yifrotzu," which means that if a person gives from his funds, his monies to tzedakah for the aniyim, the pasuk is blessing him that he will have a ribui of yayin. He'll have an extra volume of wine in his yekev. And the word yekev means the bar, the cistern, so to speak. They dig a bar so that when they crush the grapes, the wine rolls into the bar. And that bar is called a yekev. Anyway, we see clearly from this pasuk that the word tirosh means yayin, and therefore the grapes are not referred to this pasuk because grapes are not in the yekin. Again, the grapes are in the gas, which means the place where you roll around the big stone and you crush the grapes. But the yekev is the wine. So when it says v'tirosh yikavecha yifrotzu, and we're giving a bracha to someone who gives tzedakah from his mama, then we're talking about yayin. The word tirosh certainly clearly indicates wine. Dara bomen atirosh yikavecha yifrotzu. So now let's make a quick calculation. Where is the Gemara up to at this point? Is the Gemara on board with Reish Lakish that the word tirosh means yayin, or is the Gemara rejecting Reish Lakish based on the brisa with regard to the noder and concluding that tirosh is not yayin, but rather it is the grapes themselves? The grapes are called tirosh. The Gemara thought that there were two psukim that would indicate that the tirosh is the yayin itself and not the grapes. Number one, tirosh yinove b'sulos. What is going to induce a person to reveal secrets if not wine itself? You can eat 1,000 grapes. It's not going to have any impact on your psyche. And secondly, from the fact that the Torah, the Pasuk in Mishlei, identifies tirosh as yikvecha, it's in the yeken. What's in the yeken? Not grapes, but rather wine. The Gemara rejects both of those proofs and supports the proof that we adduce from the brisa in Noder Mina Tirosh, that tirosh means grapes. So how do we reject these two proofs? And the answer is davar haba mina tirosh. When the pasuk refers to Yinove Besulos, it's not referring to the wine, but to the grapes from which the wine is extracted, is produced. When the pasuk says that the tirosh is in the yekev, it means davar haba mina tirosh, that which is extracted from the grapes is in the yekev. But the word tirosh itself means grapes, not wine, but grapes, which we call the peros mesuki. So the Gemara at this point is still very hesitant to accept Reish Lakish based on the pasuk in Ma'aser Sheni, that the pasuk of Tirosh in Ma'aser Sheni is referring to Yayin to prove that Achila, that Shasiya Bichlal Achila. But I have a third pasuk. What are you going to do with this pasuk in Oshaya Novi? And the Novi is castigating the Jewish people. Nus v'yayin v'tirosh yikach lev. It means that a certain kind of behavior pattern, yikach lev, is going to divert a person's heart from concentration on the ultimate goal of getting closer to Hashem. What is this behavior pattern that Oshaya Novi is describing? It's a combination of drinking wine and sexual immorality and znus. That kind of behavior pattern, that way of life, yisar lev, is going to take a person's heart far away from fulfilling his avodat Hashem. And the word tirosh in this pasuk means yayin. Because again, we're talking about hasaras halev. Hasaras halev is a result of drinking intoxicating beverages. It's not a matter of eating grapes. Grapes do not bring you to intoxication. It's the wine that's extracted from the grapes. Ella says the Gemara, no. At this point, we have to concede. Kuli Alma, everybody agrees that Tirosh Chamrahu, that the interpretation of Tirosh is Chamra. It's wine. So what do we do with the Brisa of Hanodim and Atirosh? Asur b'chol mine misika, b'nedarim ha palach achar lochon b'nei adam. Now again, we're not familiar with the vernacular that was in vogue, that was popular at the time of the Gemara. But one thing I can promise you, at the time of the Gemara, when a person used the word tirosh as opposed to yayin, what he had in mind was peros mesukin, those fruits like grapes that are sweet, from which you produce a wine or some sort of other beverage similar to wine. And with regard to Kol HaTorah Kula, we look at the biblical definition, the biblical lexicon. But with regard to the Darim, there's the exception to the rule. The lexicon is the vernacular, and we assume that a person, when he takes his neder, he has to have what's called piv v'libo shavim. He has to have in his mouth, when he expresses verbally the haflas peh, what he has in his heart. And therefore, the law of nedarim is going to reflect the lashon b'nei adam, the way people use the language. The Gemara asks now, "My korele la leyayin, but my korele tirosh." Why is it that some psukim in the Torah use the word yayin and others use the word tirosh? Is this purely coincidental? Is it literary license to use synonyms? Our answer is yayin. Why does the pasuk use the word yayin? Because shemevi yololo li'ol. The two yuds of yayin have a certain sound to them. That sound is a wailing sound. It's called a yilala. And the impact of overindulging in intoxicating beverages is going to bring terrible things to the world. Yilala, people are going to wail. Tirosh also has a moral meaning in its context and conveys a message about avoiding intoxicating beverages. Shekoa misgarabo nasero. If a person becomes overindulgent in wine, then it's going to bring out the most base part of man, the lust and the desire for pure pleasure. And at the end, he's going to become a rush. Rush literally translates as a poor person. And it could very well be that once he gets carried away by the pleasures of drinking, he will become poor. He's got an addiction. But Rashi says that that's not what the word Nasa Rush refers to, but rather, based on the Gemara that we're going to have now, Rush means ani bidas. He's not going to become a rational thinking person. The constant involvement in drinking is going to have some sort of impact on his cerebral capabilities. And it's really interesting because what we're about to learn is that if a person drinks, what's the word I'm looking for, in measure, I'm going to just use that phrase, but he drinks the right measure, the proper limited measure, then it increases and sharpens his intellect. But once he overindulges in wine and the like, then it has the opposite effect. Rav Kahana asked a stira, a contradiction, with regard to Tirosh. Ksiv Tirosh Taf Yud Reish Shin Vikarinon Tirosh Taf Yud Reish Vav Shin. So sometimes the Torah writes the word Tirosh without a Vav, that's called Chaser Vav. And then we interpret it as Tia Rosh. But elsewhere, the Torah uses Tirosh Mole with a Vav. And that seems to indicate just the opposite. Because once you add the Vav, then you're referring to leadership, to the head, to the intellect. Not Rosh with a kamatz, but Rosh, which we spell with an aleph, Reish Aleph Shin. But in terms of the pronunciation, once you add the Vav, it's Rosh, not Rosh with the kamatz, which means that he's messing up his das. But on the contrary, Rosh, he has a very good head. So which is it? Is it T Rosh or T Rosh? Says Rav Kahana, Zaha, if he drinks the proper measure of wine, Nasa Rosh, it will sharpen his intellect, his capability of thinking wisely. But Lo Zaha, if he overindulges in wine, Nasa Rosh, he becomes an Ani Bidas, his capability intellectually is taken away from him. And Vahainu de Rava. And we have the same idea with Rava. Rava Rami. Rava postulated the following contradiction. Ksiv, in Tehillim it says, V'yayin yisamach levav enosh. That wine is a good thing. It brings joy. Now, the word Yud Shin Mem Ches could be read in two different ways, depending upon whether it's what we call a shin, which means that the dot above the shin is on the right side, or it could be read as a sin if the dot is placed on the left side. He says that in the way it's written, that's called ksiv, it's yayin yishamach lev enosh. But karina bay, the way we were, it's right by tradition, transmission, we read it as yisamach, and we make it into a sin. How do we reconcile this? A Korean ksiv should somehow be mashlim, it should complement one another. The answer is zacha misamcha, lo zacha mishamcha, mishamamo, I should say. So again, if he's very clever and mature about how to drink, then it's misamcha. It means it opens up his heart for wisdom, lev enosh. But lo zacha, if he doesn't drink in the proper measure, he overindulges in wine, then mishamamo. Mishamamo means it completely distorts his way of thinking, his chokmas haleh. V'hainu di'omar rava chamra v'reichani hakchin. That wine and reichani is smelling fragrant incense. Hakchin. They open up the heart. And they make me into a PK. Now, I don't find it right now, so I owe this to you, but elsewhere, Rava says about himself that he drank wine before he learned Torah. Where is that? I probably saw it on Shabbos, and if I didn't make a line, I usually make a line to remind myself what I want to share with you. You just look for one more second. Not finding it right this minute. Okay, just a short introduction to the next part of our sugya. We said that there are 5 categories of inuyim that are prohibited on Yom Kippur. Achila shasi is one category because we accept that shasi is b'chal achila. Then we have rechitza, sicha, nilas, sandal, and tashmish hamid. And this parallels the 5 times that the Torah repeats the word inu. Now the Gemara wants to know, how do you know that those other categories, we'll start with rechitza, are antithetical to inu? Meaning, if you bathe, that will undermine your state of inu. And then we're going to talk about sicha. How do we know that if you anoint yourself with an oil or some substance like that, that also undermines inu? It's antithetical to inu. Rechitza v'sicha minalan de'ikre inu. And the Gemara is going to begin with a parsha in Daniel to try to establish that rechitza and sicha are antithetical to inui, and therefore the mitzvah of inui on Yom Kippur generates an iser sicha and rechitza. Here the note of Yad Ramah, they call a shoselanos gufo Ushir Haroy. Aval Mushose Kedei Lishtaker Uyosim in Haroy. And according to Tosis Yom Kippurim, up to a shear of Revius, but a little bit less than that, that's fine. But Hashos Revius, Karmis Balbil Daito Ktsas. And he invokes the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Shasa Revius Al Yora. He cannot paskin a shaila. His mind is not absolutely clear. Okay, that's where we'll stop.